I'm Krista, and this is Brandon Turner, and we're here to help you be a better landlord. Now, if you just got started in rental properties today, or you've been living under a rock, you might not have heard of the legend of Brandon Turner. So it is such a remarkable thing to have you on our show. Brandon, if people don't know who you are you and what do you do?
I don't think I've ever been referred to as the legend of Brandon Turner, but I like it. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says that. My name is Brandon Turner. I've been a landlord for, almost 20 years now. Technically 20 years because my first tenants I actually had before I even owned rental property. So yeah, I've been doing real estate for 20 years-ish almost. And it's been a wild ride. I went from, one apartment I rented and rented out all the bedrooms in it to people at the local college to having just over 13,000 units right now across a couple dozen states, about $1 billion of real estate. I got a big team, about 100 employees. And I was on the Bigger Pockets podcast for a decade. Now I'm on the Better Life podcast, which I started recently. And I am obsessed with real estate in every way.
We love to hear it. It matches our obsession, and something that I am particularly thrilled to talk to you about today is how rental property management is truly a service-based business. So if you don't mind, I'm going to pepper you with some questions. Do you feel ready?
Sure, please.
Perfect. So Brandon, what does it mean to be a good landlord nowadays?
Ooh, what does it mean to be a good landlord? A couple of things. Number one, a good landlord is somebody who takes care of their tenants. So they take care of their tenants. And I mean that not like they give them free rent, not that they're like lenient and when they shouldn't be, but they're good to their tenants. They're fair, they're firm, they're provide a good product for them. So number one is being a good landlord is being a good person to your tenants. But number two is you are a good business owner as well. And in other words, you understand the business side of being a landlord, which is where a lot of landlords screw up. You know how to do a profit loss. You know what it takes to run the numbers on a rental property. How to build systems so that you're not working 80 hours a week and getting phone calls every night in the middle of the night over problems. It's like you're an operator, you can run a business, and you can treat people well. And when you can do those two things together, I think that's what makes a great landlord.
I really like how you pointed out the importance of having systems, because I do think ultimately that helps serve your tenants, but it also makes it so it's easier for you to maintain a business long-term and even scale it up.
There's a great quote from James Clear in the book Atomic Habits. He says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you don't have the right systems in place and processes and checklists and things that you do the same way every time, you will fall into chaos every single time, because that's what you are, is chaos. And so if you have the right systems, that's how you scale, that's how you build, that's how you get out of it. Yeah, systems are everything to me. I'm obsessed.
Beautiful. I think that systems are so critical. So that makes me curious about the systems you have in place to amplify the service aspect of being a landlord.
Yeah. Good question. Now that's evolved over time. When my wife and I got into rental properties together, we bought our first house, and we bought a little duplex. I guess our first rental was a little duplex we bought together, and I rented the other half out. Back then, the idea of like serving tenants was like I'd walk up and knock on the door and ask them for rent in cash and hope I didn't get robbed on the way back to my house. That was service back then. We have since learned that there's other techniques for collecting rent and taking care of people. For example, TurboTenant. And so now we want to make it as easy as possible and as simple as possible in every way, and safe too. Again, picking up rent in person, terrible idea. So we try to do things as safe and secure as possible, but also in an easy way. So, I think of there's a great book out there called Unreasonable Hospitality. And technically it's about a restaurant. It's a story of a restaurant, but it's phenomenal in terms of like, how do we treat our customers? And that's what a tenant is. They're a customer. They're paying us for a service. How do we treat them with like unreasonable hospitality? And that means in every aspect that you do, how do you treat them well? And so again, it's how do they tell you that there's a problem? Like, are you just getting text messages from your tenant? I remember one time, here's a true story, before I had a lot of good systems in place, I had a tenant who was kind of a friend of mine, had my cell phone number. Again, not necessarily a great system to have, but he texted me and said, hey, my toilet's not working right. I said, I'll take care of it. I forgot. 2 weeks later, he texted me, he said, hey, just to let you know, it's now overflowing. We've continued to use it for 2 weeks, even though it's not flushing. And I'm like, what? So then I had to go over there and unbolt the toilet from the floor and tip it over. It was a whole thing, right? Because I didn't have the right systems in place to be able to service my tenants, my customers. And so there wasn't a simple website he could go to or an app he could use or something to submit a help request or a problem. And so it just fell outside the system. So yeah, those little things, everything from tenant requests to how I move in a tenant, what's the process look like? How can I make that look professional? You know, there's a huge thing around the more professional you appear to your tenant, the more professional they're going to act toward you. Right. So if you treat yourself like, oh, I'm just a fly-by-night landlord, just doing this stuff, give me some cash, whatever, that's how they're going to enter the relationship. And that's going to be okay for them. They're going to treat you at the same level of disorganization that you treated them. And so I try to provide as much professionalism on that front as possible.
Absolutely. What I hear you saying there is the way that you show up as a landlord sets the tone for your relationship with tenants. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. It's so true.
And I think that's so interesting because a very easy trap to fall into, especially with aspirational folks who are looking to, replace their 9-to-5 income with rental housing income. There is this idea that you should just treat tenants as numbers. And that's an idea that we push back a lot against here at TurboTenant. I know that you do the same, and that's something I very much admire about you. So I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about what makes that landlord-tenant relationship different than other business relationships that people have.
Yeah, it's like a customer, right? So I do not exist without the tenant. Like I don't make money without a tenant. And I set the tone of the relationship. And so I treat my tenants very much like how I want to anyways. I want to treat them like they're, I don't say family, that's probably too strong, right? Because family, I probably would like not charge rent to and I'd give them a hug every day. But I want to treat them like a valuable piece of my business. Like they are the reason I'm alive and surviving and thriving with my financial life. And so when I treat them that way from day one in every single way, and I treat them with respect, with kindness, but also with firmness. And I think a lot of people get confused or what's the phrase like turned off. I'm sure if I put this clip on Instagram, I'll get a bunch of angry tenants saying that this is horrible. But I believe by being firm, you are being kind. For example, a tenant doesn't pay rent and you're like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. Just catch up next month. Okay, so then next month they don't pay rent or they pay part of it. And you're like, hey, it's fine. I just want to be kind. I want to be nice. Don't worry about catch up next month. Well, what happens? You're training them to be irresponsible with their money and therefore not pay you, and eventually get so much they can never get out of that debt. And now you have to evict them, and they got an eviction on the record, and it's your fault or my fault if I'm the landlord because I treated them nice, not firm. Firm is kind. What would be unkind is to be unfirm, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the cornerstone of how I treat my tenants is fair but firm. We have rules, we have guidelines. We treat our relationship like a business. Like this is what you do this, I do this. If you break the rules, this is what happens. It's all spelled out in the lease.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning the lease, because I think that is really the opportunity to truly set the tone with your tenants. And the nice thing about a lease is it is a living document, right? So I'm not saying that you necessarily want to go in there and change it all the time, nor would that be super fruitful. But as you iterate, as you grow your business, you can see what's worked and what hasn't, and you can really amp up that document to make sure that it's covering all of your bases.
Yeah, very much. I mean, when I look at my very first lease I ever did versus how we fill out a lease today, like it's so different because you get weird things encounter like one time we had a rule, no smoking in our units. That's a pretty obvious one. Well, so the tenant would just lean out their window and smoke. And they're not in their unit. Their head is outside the window. Technically, it's okay. So now we got to add in the lease. Okay, hey, you don't smoke in the unit or leaning out the window. It's like those things happen all the time. You don't even expect. They come up. It's like, okay, I got to alter my lease a little bit and make sure that it covers all those weird things we could never anticipate.
Oh, truly. I do think that's kind of a hidden secret of being a good landlord, especially long term, is that willingness to adapt and iterate. Say, all right, maybe I didn't have that in there my first go around, but I've learned that lesson now. I got my lumps. In that vein, if you are willing to be vulnerable, I am very interested in what the worst mistake you've ever made with a tenant is.
Ooh, great. Yeah, I'm happy to tell those horror stories. My very first, maybe it wasn't first tenant, maybe second tenant. Well, I don't know. This is a similar story to what I just said a little bit earlier about being nice. First thing is I did not screen him. It was a husband and wife. I didn't screen them. I had a flip. I was doing a flip, my very first flip. It didn't sell because the market is like 2009 at that point, and it's like terrible. So I rent the house out. and I didn't screen. I just put it on Craigslist, I think. I got somebody to apply. I said, great, you seem fine. You have a pulse. And so I let them move in, and they were fine for a few years. They struggled a little bit here and there to pay rent, but they usually caught up and they were okay. And then at some point, things went bad, as they tend to go in their life. Their personal life kind of fell apart. So they separated. The husband stayed and then stopped paying rent. He supposedly got into drugs and just went downhill fast, kind of became a hoarder. And then when we went through the eviction process with him, and because he stopped paying rent for months on end, and we're right at the end of the eviction process, and then he texted me and said, "You need to call me. Your house is burning down." So I call him. Yeah, and sure enough, my house was burning down, and the fire department was there, and he had set a box on the stove and then turned the stove on as he was moving out, and accidentally,
Okay.
supposedly. So anyway, the good news is, I mean, that was a mistake on not screening and then not being firm. I let him get too far behind on rent. I should have taken action earlier. But one of the benefits of real estate is that like insurance covered that. So even like the worst case, your house burning down, insurance covered all the repairs. It was like $100,000 worth of fixing to make the house back normal, but it made it beautiful. I sold the house, made some money, and moved on. So that was probably the worst mistake I ever made. I've also rented to family and friends where I shouldn't have. It's really hard to be firm with family and friends. And almost every time, either like they feel screwed or I feel screwed. Somebody feels like they got taken advantage of in those relationships. So that's worked out badly many, many times in my life. I seem to just not learn my lessons sometimes.
You're growing, you're learning as you go.
Learning and growing.
And it's hard when you care about someone and they need housing and you're like, well, I've got a unit. Like, why
Yeah.
not? But
I know exactly. We had a tenant one time. It was a Section 8 tenant. We inherited the tenant. She lived in the house. We bought the property, and there's not a lot I could have done about this necessarily. This isn't necessarily a mistake, but she was Section 8, so the government was paying her rent. Well, she just stopped allowing the Section 8 people to come in and inspect her unit, and she went kind of nuts. And Section 8 stopped paying, so then we got money. We eventually had to start evicting her, and then she threatened to shoot us. So that was fun. She wrote a note saying, "If you come near my house, I'm going to shoot you." So we let the sheriff take care of that one. And you know what? We got the house back, fixed it up, made some money eventually. So real estate is a very forgiving asset class. And, some people just have trouble they're going through, and we just work through it.
You just work through it. And it is a long game, so you have some time
It is
to
a
recoup
long game.
those losses. Okay, thank you for sharing those stories. They are quite harrowing. I'm glad you're still in the game.
Still here.
Still in it, still thriving. So a couple of things that I picked out as some common mistakes that I've heard other investors discussing: not screening tenants, renting to friends and family. Are there any other typical mistakes you see newer investors making that you can help save them from by watching this episode?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake, or at least one of the biggest mistakes new investors make, is not understanding what CapEx is and how much it actually costs. And so when I talk about CapEx, I'm talking about the expenses of replacing your water heater every 10 years, your stove every 10 years, your roof every 20 years, that stuff, the appliances and the carpet. And it's like the big items, they need replacing. And so we look at repairs, most people budget for repairs. Like, yeah, I'm going to budget a couple $100s a month for repairs. Fine. What about the fact that your roof costs $20,000 and it happens every 20 years? So that's $1,000 a year. That's whatever, $80 a month. That's a real expense and so what happens is investors buy rental properties, they hang on to them, and at the end of the year, they realize they made no money. And they're like, why did I make no money? And they're like, oh, it's because I had that water heater go out. Well, that was all the cash flow for the year. Next year will be better. Next year comes around, and at the end of the year, they look back and they're like, oh, I actually made no money on average. I lost money. Why? Oh, that's right, because the fridge went out, and then so did we had that problem with the whatever heat pump. Oh yeah, that's right. And then next year, and it happens year after year after year. Oh yeah, we had to replace the carpet. We had to do the rehab because the tenant trashed the unit. And so they look back over a 5 or 10 year period, and they realize they never made any cash flow. Now, thankfully, real estate in America has appreciated over and over and over and over and over, year after year, tends to go up, and so people are bailed out from appreciation. But we got in the game for cash flow. We want financial freedom. And so you've got to learn how to underwrite a deal knowing that it's going to be several $100s a month in CapEx just from replacing things every single year that go broke.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, especially since the depreciation period is typically 27 and a half years. So it's not a quick turnaround if you are trying to get that money back.
Yeah, it's actually another reason why I like the burr strategy, which is why we talked about, which is like where you buy a property, fix it up, and then you rent it out and then refinance it. And the beauty of that is you are front loading all of your CapEx expenses. So you're doing the new roof, you're doing the new water heater, new appliances. So you should get a good 5 to 10 years without a lot of heavy CapEx when you do that. And I like that a lot. You also get higher quality tenants that pay more money because it's a nicer property, and people pay for quality. That's something I think a lot of landlords miss, is that like even people in like, C class or D class apartments and houses, like they still watch HGTV. They still want a nice, cute kitchen and a cute house. And sometimes that's as easy as a paint color. Like sometimes just the way you think about design a little bit doesn't cost more money, but it brings in a higher quality, like paying tenant that will pay more money because everybody wants nice. And nice doesn't necessarily mean expensive. It just means you put a little thought and intention into it.
Yes. Yes, I like to tell people to imagine themselves in the tenant's shoes. Would you actually want to live in this unit? And if the answer is no, what can you do to bring it to that level?
Yeah, I
Uh,
love that. We used to even stage our rentals sometimes. Like we'd put like you stage houses to sell it. We'd even sometimes stage them lightly to rent them, just so they looked a little bit extra nice. Like we put mattresses and beds and hung up some artwork on the wall, and it just makes it look a lot nicer from the photos. When people come tour the property, it just looks nicer. And I mean, I'm not spending thousands of dollars on this, but I'll spend a few $100 to make it look just beautiful. Little things like, yeah, flowers on the counter, like just make the kitchen just brighten up and look nicer.
yeah, it makes it easier for them to imagine living there, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, speaking about tenants and their willingness to pay more for better quality, even if that's not necessarily costing you as a landlord much more money, I'm curious about how you determine your renter criteria and if you've had to adjust it over time.
A couple of things. First of all, with criteria, I care a lot about it. I'll give you like 3 or 4 things. Number one, I really care about their rental history. That's one of the most important things. I want to know how they've been to past landlords, because people don't really change very much. But we all talk about how we change, we want to change, we have New Year's resolutions and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, like how you've been is how you are and how you'll be for the most part. It's pretty rare for somebody to 180 and change their life entirely. So if they've been bad to several landlords, and not just their previous one, but like the previous, right? Like going back a little bit, sometimes if you just talk to their current landlord, they just want to get them out. So they'll give them a glowing review. So number one, we care a lot about their previous tenancies at other landlords' places. I care a lot about their income. Like they need to earn 3 times the rent in order to rent from me. That's typically our line. And they might believe they can do more. No, I can make it work. It's really, really hard. I don't want my tenant to be constantly fighting which bill do I pay and which one don't I. So they've got to make enough money, and I want to guide them on that. We look at stuff like prior evictions, criminal history, some of that stuff, obviously, making sure they're going to be a good fit there. I look at their job history as well, because I've had the problem where somebody makes 3 times the rent, but they got their job last month, and then they're fired. And I look at their history, and they rarely last more than 2 months at a job. Okay, well, that's a problem. So I want stability in where they live as well. As long as they meet those criteria, we'd love to have them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think stability is such a good way to put it, right? You want someone who's going to get in there and be able to thrive, but
Yeah.
consistently. Is there any point of that tenant screening criteria that you've had to adjust in a major fashion, maybe since you first started versus today?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I've gotten bigger and nicer units, like we have units now that are for a studio apartment, it's $2,000 in Austin, Texas, or whatever. So like they're nicer properties. Those ones, like we've had to, I wouldn't say change the screening quality. We've had to change how we market for things, definitely, especially at like a higher price point. And in a competitive market, Austin has dropped significantly in occupancy. And so we've had to adjust how we market. We've had to adjust whether or not we're going to allow pets in. Like ideally, I would like not to have pets, but we need to get more tenants. We got to get our vacancy down. And so we'll allow more pets. We'll allow things once in a while if they've got a problem, like they have an eviction from years ago or they have another thing. We'll sometimes allow for compensating factors, like they can pay, double the security deposit, or they can get a co-signer. We've done things like that to try to get people in the door. Like we'll be more aggressive if we need to fill up a property, but I don't like to lower my standards. I had a buddy in high school who was just a joke. Hey, if you can't reach your goals, and he was talking about dating, if you can't reach your goals, just lower your standards. And I'm like, I don't want to lower my standards, but I might allow for compensating factors to compensate for the risk I'm taking with a tenant. So
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. kind of in that mindset of scaling and growing and trying to see where those compromise points might have to be.
Yeah.
How do you end up growing your landlord-tenant relationships while scaling?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we in the beginning, all my tenants were, they had my cell phone number, they knew who I was. We would talk every month. They'd drop off their rent at my house or whatever. That was and I don't recommend any of that. Where today, I mean, with 13,000 tenants, like no one knows my phone number or even that I exist. And so it's moved much more to the company. So they know the company, they know the property managers. It's been much more brand focused as I've scaled. Much more systems, like we talked about earlier, much more systems focused as I've scaled, a lot more policy stuff. And I like that because it allows for less interpretation and personal opinion. Like, oh, I know they don't quite make enough money, but I really like them. They're really hardworking people. It's like, no, the policy is they have to earn this much money. And if they don't earn much money, then here are some things we can compensate for the risk. But if they can't meet those, then we just can't do it. And so much more systems and process focused as I've scaled. And I mean, I do almost nothing anymore, right? With 13,000 tenants, like there's very, very little that I actually personally have to do other than hold like high level meetings and make sure systems and processes are being followed.
Totally. Totally. And something that I appreciate particularly about systems is the fact that you can start to put those down into writing or wherever you need them and implement before you run into a snag. Like, of course,
Yeah.
mistakes are going to show you where you need these systems in place. But by watching your podcast, by watching this podcast, by diving into the world of rental property investment and learning from other people's mistakes, you can really head off some of those painful lessons by nailing down your processes early.
Yeah, I mean, you can learn from your own mistakes, or you can learn from other people's mistakes. I recommend the latter. It's way easier to learn from somebody else's mistakes. And so that's where, I wrote the book with my wife, the book on managing rental properties, which continues to just sell a ridiculous amount of copies because it was basically our systems manual that my wife was like, well, this is how we run our business. So my wife wrote most of that book, and she's like, this is how I run the business. Let me just put it down in a book, and people can just copy our systems. Now it's probably a little outdated in that it's over 10 years old, I think, at this point, or close to 10 years old. I probably should go and update some of those systems, but it just makes it, simple to learn from all the mistakes that we've made, like things like smoking out the window. Learn from that. Now you can put it in your lease. You don't have to deal with that yourself. You learn from other people. Another fun addition, like ChatGPT and kind of the AI revolution that's happening right now is making it really helpful as well, because you can just have a conversation with a computer on where are the holes in my argument? Like where are the holes in this lease? What am I missing? What might I not be seeing? And that's kind of a fun addition to the world right now and of landlording, is how AI can help assist in there.
Oh, 10,000%. I'm going to take a moment and brag really quickly because here at TurboTenant, we released an AI lease audit tool so that people can actually upload their lease for free and just see what holes are there based on the leases that we have that we've worked with our legal team to produce.
That's amazing.
So, thank you. I will tell the team you think so.
Yeah, that's so cool.
It's just such a cool tool. Are there any other tools that you would recommend landlords check out, especially in regards to maintaining relationships with their tenants or a healthy rapport, let's say?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, a couple of things. One, managing rehab I mean, we all have to deal with rehab projects occasionally, whether it's a small, like, hey, the tenant punched a hole in the door, or it's like, hey, the kitchen needs to be remodeled, or there's a big hole in the bathroom floor. I don't have a great software necessarily for that, but I would just emphasize that is your chance to shine your customer service to your tenant. So letting them know exactly what you're going to do, letting them know when you're going to be there, treating them like an asset, like somebody that you value in life, because you do value them. I would say those systems around rehabbing a project or doing heavy maintenance while a tenant is living there, super, super important. It's probably the biggest thing that's going to drive a tenant nuts is if they want. I think that's actually, they've done surveys. That's the number one or number two reason people move is maintenance requests and problems that aren't addressed. And so being militant on getting those things done and treating people with unreasonable hospitality in the process is huge.
Absolutely huge. And I really like how you mentioned being super communicative and saying, hey, I see this problem. This is when I'm going to follow up with you. And then actually following through on what you say. It makes a world of difference.
Yeah, people are terrible at that. In general, I mean, think of every contractor you probably ever hired. It's they're just show up, just do what you say you're going to do. If you just show up and do what you say you're going to do, you're going to instantly be my favorite person in the world. And it's not that hard to just do what you say you're going to do. And if you, for some reason, can't, just communicate that with me. It's like, it's not that hard, but it is hard for almost everyone. But that means the bar's low. And so if you are just good, even halfway decent, you're better than 90%.
Exactly. And that ties in really nicely because one of our core values here at TurboTenant is to hashtag be better. So I'm really interested in learning how your real estate investment strategy has enabled you to be better.
Good question. I'll give you a few thoughts on that. First of all, my strategy in real estate, we do a lot of low income because we do a lot of mobile home parks. And so when I got into mobile home parks, I realized like we're dealing with people who are at the very like the bottom 20% of income earners in America. They don't make a lot of money. They work minimum wage jobs. And so we have as a team at Open Door Capital and my management company and all that, we have aimed for very diligently to be how can we treat people who earn $8 an hour and they can barely afford to pay their rent and they're living in $300 a month rentals. How can we treat them like a $2,000 a month Austin, tech worker? Like, how do we treat them with that level of service and dignity and gratitude? Because we are grateful for them. And that has been in the mobile home park world, that is very rare. Like many mobile home operators are just bad people. Like they don't take care of their tenants in any way. They don't care about them. They leave maintenance problems to go forever. They don't care about the property. They don't deal with the violence that might come up once in a while. They just don't deal with problems. And so the way that we're better is by treating everybody the way that we would want to be treated, or the way that I would want my mom treated if my mom was living in one of my rentals. Yeah, like we strive. One of our core values at our team is it's called good people doing good. It's we're constantly trying to say how do we as good people, like we believe we're good people, how do we do good to our tenants? And that could be anything from adding like the free book libraries in our mobile home parks or apartment communities. We're working on like financial freedom or financial literacy programs to help our tenants. We haven't launched that yet, but we're hoping to launch that in the next year. Where we bring in, Zoom meetings for all of our tenants, and we try to teach them like financial literacy stuff. Yeah, just how do we do good? We've had tenants that have lost things in fires, and then it wasn't properly insured, and we've done GoFundMe's, and then like as a team raised money to be able to like give them their house back and get them new property. Things like that have been kind of core to our management style and our strategy.
That is absolutely beautiful and very touching. Thank you for
Thanks.
sharing that. And thank you for doing that because you're so right, particularly in the mobile home sphere. It can be kind of dismal when you look out and see how people are being treated. So it's great to hear that you and your team are committed to lifting folks up. In that same vein, talking about how you want to move through the world and what your vision is for not only your portfolio, but for your life. We talk a lot with especially newer investors about establishing goals and learning to stick to their why in terms of why they're actually embarking on all of these deals. How do you stick to your why?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do a couple things I'll lay out. So first of all, I'm a big believer of a process that I call identity-based goal setting, and I think will resonate really well here. Identity-based goal setting says I want to set goals in my life around who I want to become, not around just what I want to own. So I want to have a jet. I want to have a big house. I want to have a mansion. Like, fine. I want to have a Rolex. Okay. But who do you want to be? Like, what does that identity of your life want to look like? And so we actually have we built an AI tool. Anybody can go use it if they want. It's just abetterlife.com/identity. It's totally free. I don't even think it requires an opt-in, but like you can like work on identity statements around the different categories of your life. Like I am what? And once we establish a really strong identity, like this is my identity, my ideal identity statement, who I want to become. Now I can set goals that align to that. And so there's a whole process, but I'll lay out the very beginning of it is every single quarter I do what's called a wheel of life exercise. And so it's like a pie-shaped chart where there's 10 slices of the pie. And every one of those slices represents one category of life. So there's your like finances, there's your career, there's your health and fitness, there's your environment, like the world around you, there's your parenting, there's your spousing. Is that a word? Spousing, like how you are showing up in relationships, like romantic. There's like 10 categories of life. And I rate each one on a scale of 1 to 10 compared to how I want to show up in that area. Like in my marriage, out of 1 out of 10, 10 being a perfect marriage for me, where am I at? I'm at a 6. Okay. So step one is being brutally honest about where I am. Step two is about defining your future self on who you want to become. And that's where the identity piece comes in. So I know where I am. I'm telling the truth by being brutally honest with where I am and where I need to apply focus and pressure in order to have a better life. Then I define the future. Where do I want to be 5 years from now? And I have a whole process on like, what does that look like? I want to get really detailed on who I want to be and what I want that category of my life to look like. And then I align goals, 5-year goals, 1-year goals, quarterly goals, weekly goals, daily goals. And I put them all in a line. So if I hit my daily target, and I do that over and over and over, I should hit my weekly target. If I hit my weekly target, I should hit my quarterly target. If I hit my quarterly target, I should hit my annual one. If I hit my annual year after year after year, I'm going to live the life that I wanted to live 5 years from now. And that life 5 years from now is based on the person I want to be and the life that I believe will bring the most value to my life and the people around me. And so when I can align all of that together from vision to action, and I work on it consistently and I get accountability even. I'm a huge proponent of like accountability to make sure I stick with it. Like I can achieve anything and I can do it in alignment with who I want to become. Does that answer that question?
Oh, absolutely. That's a very generous answer. And I am definitely going to go home and look up that Wheel of Life exercise because that sounds
Yeah,
like
it's super powerful. You can do it for free if you want. abetterlife.com/wheel. There's a free tool on there as well. It's again, no opt-in, no email, or I don't even think. Yeah, abetterlife.com/wheel. Super cool.
Love it. Everyone should go check that out because I think
Yeah.
at bare minimum, it gets you to be introspective. And that's really powerful,
Yes.
both in your personal life and in your business life. So thank you for sharing that. My one final question for you for now. You are uniquely giving and uniquely committed to not only your own success and your family's success, but the success of people in the Better Life tribe. How and why, Brandon? Because not everybody does what you do. And so I'm curious kind of what sparked that desire in you to give back so often.
Yeah, thank you. It started actually, I met Tim Tebow. So Tim Tebow's a famous football player, very generous guy, very focused on like anti-human trafficking stuff across the world, has done just incredible good for the world. So I met him at a mastermind I was a part of, and I was literally at that mastermind meeting with a woman there who was a private jet broker. And I was literally looking at private jets because I was going to launch this new business. I didn't have a name for it yet. Now it's Better Life, but I was going to launch this new business and I was going to make a ton of money and I was going to buy a private jet. And I knew that it was just inevitable for me. And so I was shopping for a jet. And that night I met Tim Tebow and he gave us talk to 50 of us in the room about just the horrors of human trafficking and like what he calls the MVPs of the world, the most vulnerable people. And he said a line that just forever changed my life. He said, "I don't want to enter heaven well rested." And it's kind of like the idea of I don't want to leave anything out on the field. Like I want to give it up my all when I'm out there. I don't want to die and leave this life knowing that I had more gas in my tank. And I mean, every eye was teared up and bawling at that thing when we're just hearing these horrible stories of how just terrible the world is. And I just felt like I was like, this business isn't for a private jet for me. It's for those people, the most vulnerable people. And so, yeah, the Better Life Tribe just became 100% of all the profits we make go to charities that fight human trafficking. And like, there's a I call it a selfish component to everything you do. I mean, in other words, like, hey, if I can give away millions and millions of dollars, that makes me look pretty good. Maybe people will invest in my fund. Maybe people will buy my books, maybe whatever. Like I'm sure I'm going to benefit from it. I'm sure I have benefited from it. I don't want to say that's why I did it because it literally wasn't. But yeah, if I want to be honest, like there's benefits to charity. Why does every celebrity go to charity, galas and do all that stuff? It's like there's benefit to both the soul and the wallet to be generous. In fact, they've done so many studies on this. Is like, if you want to make more money, just give more money away. Like there's a very direct correlation that pretty much every religion has figured out thousands of years ago, but now like science is catching up with it, which says like, if you donate money, you earn more money. There's something about the very act of giving away money that makes you more money. And nobody really understands exactly why. There's a lot of guesses on, releasing your hold on money and being able to take more risk and all that. But it's an undeniable fact that your life is improved. And even if you don't make money when you give money away, even if you were to give all your money away and lose it, nothing makes you feel better than when you're helping other people. Like nothing makes you feel better than helping other people. So yeah, that's a little why I do it.
I am just so inspired. I've got tingles. It's amazing.
Well, thanks.
Well, thank you. I mean, it has just been incredible to have you on. If you are looking to keep up with the Brandon Turner, check him out on Instagram at BeardyBrandon or go to beardybrandon.com. Check out the Better Life Tribe and make sure that you are learning from all of the lessons that he is putting out there, because he's putting out quite a lot. So again, thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate your time here today.
Oh, thank you. This has been amazing.
Of course. And audience, if you'd like to weigh in, have a question for Brandon, have a question for me, please put them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.